So, my communication practicum final project um, has to do with the movie that I chose that I have been writing about all semester. My objectives are to explore multiple elements of communication, to provide an in depth personal analysis and evaluation of the communication process I've learned about throughout this semester. The movie I chose is called Upside Down, and it was made in 2012. This movie is set in a futuristic universe where double gravity exists, allowing two planets to orbit around one sun, each with its own and opposite gravity. There's three basic laws to double gravity. All matter is pulled by the gravity from the world it comes from and not the other. An object's weight can be offset using matter from the opposite world, aka inverse matter. After a few hours of contact, matter in contact with inverse matter starts to burn. My movie review, the main characters are Adam and Eden. Adam is played by Jim Sturgis, and Eden is played by Kirsten Dunst. They meet as young children. They develop a bond and start a genuine friendship. Even though it is forbidden to cross into each other's worlds, both Adam and Eden always find their way to each other. They share food made from bees that fed off flowers from both worlds, and they share many moments of laughter and joy together. As they both come of age in their teenage years, a romance starts to blossom and they soon fall in love with each other. And throughout the storyline, their love is tested time and time again, but yet against all odds, their love withstands every test each time. Even though their worlds literally tear them apart, they keep finding their way back to each other. As the narrator stated during the very beginning of the film, their two souls, which were separated at birth, always find their way back to one another. So there's three elements of communication that I found within the movie. The three elements are called communication continuum, noise, and environment. Communication continuum is an interpersonal communication that exists on a continuum that ranges from impersonal to highly personal communication. Communication continuum is an element of interpersonal communication. Communication continuum I found to be in the movie from the very beginning, showing when Adam and Eden first crossed paths when they first met. Their initial contact was more impersonal, as they didn't know each other very well, and they just happened to run into each other as Adam was climbing to gather inverse rain. However, as time goes on, the communication between the two of them transitioned to highly personal, especially as the two develop feelings for each other and eventually fall in love. The next one is noise, which refers to anything that interferes or disrupts the communication process. Noise is an element of interpersonal communication that is found multiple times throughout the film, as it seems everything continued to interrupt and disrupt the communication between Adam and Eden. From the first fall Eden took that appeared to be fatal, Adam thought all was lost between the two of them. Years later, he sees her on a TV speaking on behalf of Transworld job openings, and he applies for a job there. When he commences to speak with Eden, she doesn't recognize or remember who he is due to amnesia. So this caused a painful disruption in the hopes Adam had to reconnect with Eden. Then the issues of Adam's job security threatened the relationship even further and forced Adam to have to cut all lines of communication with Eden after he was threatened by Transworld goons. Every event and circumstance occurred to separate Adam and Eden, not only from communicating with each other, but from being together, period. However, Their love withstood every obstacle that came their way. Environment refers to the external environment where the communication takes place. The entire environment of both Adam and Eden is very beautiful when they first meet each other. As their worlds are complete opposites of each other, their love grows stronger. They fight even harder to find their way back to each other. The environment of both worlds is hostile outside of their love. It's forbidden for either of them to cross over into the other's world outside of when they're working at Transworld, the corporation from the above. Throughout the entire film, there's presented an insurmountable chain of events stemming from both of their environments that threatens their relationship. From gunshots to corporate sabotage to Adam's life and Eden's career being threatened, outside forces try to prevent this love affair from continuing. However, their love overcomes even these three elements of communication. Culture influences communication. Elements concerning culture within the movie. Those are high context culture, collectivistic culture, and saving face culture. Elements concerning culture, high context culture. The first element concerning culture that I notice in the movie is the high context culture element. Rules are not verbalized because expected behavior is understood. Each character in this movie understood how they were expected to behave and carry themselves according to the rules of communication between people from each opposing planet. Everyone from down below to the up above planets are raised in each culture to know how they are to act. Knowledge is internalized. Each person uses their own instincts, and their behavior is conditioned by the rituals that are taught to them as they are children regarding communication with people from the opposite planet. In the textbook, chapter 6, Making Connections, figure 6.2, Communication in Low Context and High Context Cultures, United States of America, 2010, Countries and Their Cultures, Culture of United States of America is the reference for this high context culture section. The next element concerning culture is collectivistic culture. The second element I noticed in the movie is that it has a collectivistic culture. The culture as a whole on both planets is interdependent, as people from both planets rely on each other to work together to keep the economy going by working at Transworld. Without employees from down below and also the up above planet working for Transworld, the economy of both planets would collapse, as that is the only major corporation with available jobs. Therefore, humans on either planet, but especially the down below planet, will not survive without Transworld, and in turn, Transworld wouldn't be successful without its employees. Everyone kind of has to rely on each other for survival, and each group of people from both planets have to work as a group to achieve success for Transworld and keep money in their pockets. Elements concerning culture, saving face. The third element concerning culture is saving face. Adam did this pretty much throughout the entire movie. When he was trying to impress Eden after discovering she was still alive, when he saw her on the job advertisement commercial for Transworld. Adam did everything he could to maintain a positive position in the eyes of Eden. It was important for him not to display that he was from down below. So much so that he literally wore inverse matter to keep himself physically grounded while visiting Eden up above. He didn't tell her all that he had to go through just to get up there and see her. He didn't tell her that he was poor or that he was struggling. He just did his best to stay positive and even went out of his way to take her out to lunch to remind her of their past. Adam wanted nothing but for Eden to remember who he was and the connection that they previously had. He worked hard to keep her impressed and to get her to fall back in love with him because he still very much so loved her. Next, I will talk about verbal and nonverbal messages, emotional and conversational messages. I will cover verbal messages, nonverbal messages, and verbal versus nonverbal messages. Verbal messages. Connotation is a key term for verbal communication. It is created by the emotional association you have with a word, either positive or negative. The level of emotional association is based on personal experiences and feelings. There's a scene in the movie at the 16 minute mark that shows Adam's aunt's house on fire as she is being dragged out of her house by multiple men. Adam is screaming his Aunt Becky's name over and over, saying, "Becky, Becky, no, no, please, no." His Aunt Becky is screaming, "No, no, no, Adam, you did nothing wrong, nothing." Adam continues to scream out, "Becky, no, no, Becky, please, no, 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 no." You can literally hear his heart breaking as Adam is crying and being held back by some of the men. This part of the scene is very melancholic. The 10-minute clip ends around timestamp 1546. I'm going to see if I can actually find that real quick. So as you can see, that was a very emotional scene right there where Adam clearly verbally communicated his feelings towards his Aunt Becky being snatched out of her home and being taken away from him, as she is his only living relative that he had left. So nonverbal communication includes tone of voice, eye contact, and facial expression. All three of those are elements of nonverbal communication. The nonverbal elements I see a consistent pattern of are tone of voice, eye contact, and nonverbal signals. At timestamp 1640, 16 minutes, 40 seconds, a female customer by the name of Mrs. Nathanson walks into the lab that Adam and his friends Albert, I forget the other guy's name, but Albert works in there with him. So Mrs. Nathanson walks into the lab. She's offering inverse matter as a way to pay off debts, stating her husband claimed it was stainless steel from the main pipeline from the up above. Albert's facial expression is curious and intrigued as he makes eye contact with Mrs. Nathanson and pays close attention to what she is saying as she reaches her into her coat to pull out the jar containing the inverse matter. Her facial expression is one full of hope and anxiety as she is wondering if the inverse matter she brought in will be enough to pay off her family's debt. She smiles nervously as she asks Albert if what she brought in will cover the debt. She tells him it's from the main pipeline. Her smile broadens as she states this with pride. Albert's facial expression changes to a surprise mixed with excitement as he raises his eyebrows and says, "Oh, wow." So you can tell just through his facial expression what he's communicating and what he's feeling. And his tone of voice, the way he made eye contact, and the nonverbal signals actually told you pretty much exactly what he was thinking, that he was very much so intrigued and excited to use the inverse matter for their projects. So I'm going to actually go to this scene at the 16-minute 40-second timestamp. Okay. So as you got to see kind of that scene, you got to quickly see Albert's facial expressions change. You got to see Mrs. Nathanson's facial expression change, and all of that. So verbal messages versus nonverbal messages. Conflict management. Effective communicators combine the two concepts to ensure clarity and comprehension. In the movie, at the 29-minute 53-second timestamp, Albert's nonverbal and verbal messages convey elements of facial expression, intensifying his words, along with his tone of voice continuing to increase in anger. His tone of voice is almost a growl at this point. Then Albert walks out of the building in anger and frustration as he shakes his head. It is clear and obvious that his nonverbal message is conveying his hurt feelings and disappointment of Adam's decision to get a job at Transworld. And his words... Oh, I'm sorry. So, yes, it is clear and obvious that Albert's nonverbal message is conveying his hurt feelings and disappointment of Adam's decision in the words Adam just verbally communicated to him regarding getting a job at Transworld so that he can try to get back on his feet, and also as a way to reconnect with Eden. And Albert was very upset with Adam for going to work for what they consider to be the enemy, which is Transworld. So at the 30-minute 10-second timestamp, you're able to see in the clip where Adam's facial expression is one almost in tears and full of pain as he is breathing heavily from his emotional response and reaction. The nonverbal message came across very clear. With his verbal message, the pain of losing his family to Transworld is still there, and he hasn't forgotten what they did. This seems to strike an emotional response within Albert, because he stops in his tracks and slowly turns around in response to Adam's painful expression. Albert looks at Adam with sorrow in his eyes, again communicating non-verbally that he can relate to what Adam is feeling. So I'll go to that clip real quick. Okay, so there you were able to see in the clip what I was speaking of. I feel that Albert and Adam both effectively used verbal messages and nonverbal messages in that clip. Um, and also, it covered conflict management where they were disagreeing, had strong feelings about the subject, but they still were able to resolve the conflict. So, my evaluation summary is this, regarding what I've learned this semester about the importance of communication and everything that was covered, and also what I've noticed even within this movie. How a person communicates is a direct reflection of how they feel about themselves internally. Regardless of the interpersonal relationship type, whether it's a friendship, romantic relationship, or familial relationship, people naturally project their feelings through their communication. It is very important to have great listening skills to avoid misunderstanding another person's message. It is highly important to stop and think before reacting, especially when it comes to conflict management. Possessing the ability to control your own interpersonal power can have a positive impact on someone else that is looking up to you. Taking this course has shed light on some behavior patterns I've held all of my life that were unhealthy. It's also helped me to see where I have grown in positive ways. It is so important to have effective communication with everyone we come in contact with, especially those that we engage with on a daily basis. And here are the APA citations and references for everything that I used today in my presentation, from the book and also from the websites regarding the movie Upside Down.